Okay, so why do we actually need an insight? Well, there is some debate that still rages in our industry as to whether we really need a consumer or customer insight as a starting point for our product, services, or brand communications. And we're certainly not here to tell you that every single product that ever launched that was successful had an insight behind them. What we do say is that it increases your chances of success if you have an insight behind your product. There are various quotes in the industry about failure rates. On screen you see the Boston Consulting Group claiming 80% of new innovations fail to find what we would call a sustainable market. So having an insight can increase your chances of success here. There's often the discussion about Henry Ford and his famous quote that consumers don't know what they want, that they would have asked for a faster horse. What we argue is that actually what consumers were telling Henry was the answer to a question about a solution. If Henry, however, had actually followed consumers around in their day-to-day life and observed, he probably would have noticed a need or an insight, perhaps, for example, to visit friends in other parts of the US or to do business in other parts of the US, leading him to an insight about a need that could have been solved by many things, among them the Model T Ford, of course, the solution we all know about. And what we also notice is that today in the industry there's a change in discourse. More and more CMOs and CEOs are actually stating that their company should become insight-led or will become insight-led, and they are putting a lot of actions behind this. But it's not just the marketing industry that we detect this. For example, innovation, one area where in the past it's always been a little bit controversial as to whether we need insights behind our products. Now even here, some of the world's leading thought leaders behind innovation, some of them you see on screen, have actually been more and more highlighting in their keynote speeches the need for empathy, relevance, a strong consumer insight as a starting point for great innovation. So we see that the discourse is actually changing. So our belief is if you want success, you have to be super relevant to consumers, to understand their needs better maybe even than they do. Now one person that may have understood this very well was Nelson Mandela. And on screen you see one of his famous quotes, which is basically saying that understanding what a person says is one step to understanding them. But if you actually speak their own language, you get to an emotional connection with them to understand what they really feel and what they need. So Mandela, in a way, is understanding this idea of relevance. So you may say, how is businesses doing? How are businesses doing in today's world? Are they actually becoming insight-led in their products and innovations? Well, for sure, some big companies are doing this. Heineken and Philips, for example, have for many years put consumer insights or customer insights at the core of almost all of their innovations or branding messages. But it's not only the large established companies. Some of the newer players or technology companies, for example Spotify and Netflix, that are also doing this. Maybe a question for you. For many of you who live in Europe, you may have seen this particular product, the Philips wake-up light, as we call. Do you think there's a strong consumer or customer need or insight behind this product? Well, yes, it's actually to do with how you wake up. And the way that you wake up influences how you feel, how you perform, generally, especially in the first hours of your day. And I think we all know about winter, the dreaded winter wake-up, where suddenly in the dark your alarm clock pings and you are abruptly awoken from your sleep. You feel grumpy, you feel irritable, and maybe your performance at work even suffers in the first couple of hours. So the wake-up light addressed this insight by providing a solution to wake up in a more gentle way. Okay, I am actually personally a music fan and a musician, and on screen you see an insight which probably describes something I believe in, maybe yourself as well, if you take a moment to read it. And I would ask you, do you believe that there's any brands, products or services out there that address this consumer insight? Well, yes, we believe very well-known companies like Spotify and Netflix are actually working well to address that consumer or customer need. So it's not just big corporations that are having insights behind their products and services, but also the kind of new kids on the block, the more tech-driven companies that we sometimes think don't believe necessarily in having customer insights behind their innovations. And a final example from the Netherlands is Giraffe, which actually launch extra long t-shirts for extra long men, so to speak. So if you're very tall and thin, as many men in the Netherlands are, you're faced with a dilemma that you buy an extra large t-shirt. But unfortunately, an extra large t-shirt is often also extra wide. So this doesn't meet the needs of a large group of people. Giraffe have recognized this consumer need or insight and have brought to the market extra long t-shirts that fit you well, making these particular people very happy.